I don't support discrimination against anyone. What this legislation does, what it did when President Clinton signed it into law in 1993, and what it served in the some 30 states where it's been the law, is provide a framework for determining whether or not government action puts a substantial burden on a person's religious liberty.
That, of course, the governor of Indiana, Mike Pence, explaining away his previous position yesterday when it comes to Indiana's Religious Freedom Restoration Act. He's been switching gears, and here to tell us more about it, Peter Sprigg, Senior Fellow of Policy Studies at the Family Research Council. Peter, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So, Peter, I mean, the governor certainly seemed to take quite a turn yesterday, didn't he?
Well, it was interesting because he said that he wanted the legislature to pass additional clarifying legislation to clarify the intent of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. But at the same time, he very strongly defended the principles behind it and made the point, which I agree with, that much of the coverage, the news coverage of this story has been grossly distorted and misleading. So,
How so?
Well, this has been presented as though it is a bill that is intended to create a license to discriminate against homosexuals, as though that's its purpose and its plain meaning and its effect. And that's just completely false. As Governor Pence said in the clip you just indicated, all this bill does is to create a standard of review for cases in which an individual asserts that a government action, any government action, it could involve eminent domain or zoning or something like that, is infringing on their religious liberty. It doesn't guarantee that the religious person will always win. It only creates a standard of review.
Let me ask you this, Peter. So glad you're joining us. The Pew Research Center lists so many major religions, the Roman Catholic Church, Orthodox Jews, Muslims, who oppose same-sex marriage. So give us some examples in real practical life how this would work out.
Well, I mean, the reason why the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was first written at the federal level, and as the governor said, there's been a federal law for 22 years, since 1993. It was supported almost unanimously in Congress and enthusiastically signed into law by President Bill Clinton. And now 20 other states have passed similar legislation because the Supreme Court said that the federal law didn't apply to the states. But it was passed in response to a Supreme Court decision that involved the smoking of peyote in religious ceremonies by American Indians. And a lot of people from a variety of religions, Christian, Jewish, and people across the ideological spectrum came together because even though we don't necessarily want to smoke peyote in our religious ceremonies or even think that it's a good idea for Native Americans to do so, we understood that this was a legitimate sincere religious belief that they held, and it's not for the government to be judging.
All right, Peter, I want to jump in on you. I want to jump in on you because you do keep referring to the government, and you did that earlier. I actually agree with you that the media has not done a good job of explaining this, but isn't part of the reason because you just said, and the governor keeps saying, that it's about government interfering with religious beliefs. Section 7 of the Indiana law, which is the one section that doesn't mirror the federal law, takes that away from the government sphere and takes it down into the private sphere, which is something that has not been clear before. Don't you think that this is where the real problem is coming from?
Well, it takes it into the private sphere only in the sense that it says this can apply to litigation, even if the state is not a party to the litigation.
That's a big change.
I think when private parties go to court, they are enlisting the power and strength of the government to try to enforce their will. So that I consider government action as well. That is a different, it's true that that's different language from the language that was in the federal RFRA, but there are other courts that have already interpreted these laws in a similar way. So it may be new language, it's not a new concept.
We don't have too much time, but can you give us a couple of examples of how somebody who's a Muslim or an Orthodox Jew or Roman Catholic might be sued under this law?
Well, I mean, one recent example is the Supreme Court heard a case involving a Muslim prisoner who wanted to be able to grow a beard in prison. And that was contrary to the grooming standards that the prison had for.
Yeah, but that's really, Peter, I'm going to interrupt only because that's not on point. It had nothing to do with being served in a
Freedom
store.
Restoration Act, because that's what it's about.
Yes,
really
that's about Freedom of Information Act, exactly. Anyhow, do appreciate you joining. We do have to move on. Peter Sprigg, Senior Fellow of Policy Studies at Family Research Council. You're going to be busy with this, Peter. Coming up next, Newsmax White House correspondent John Gizzi joins the show. And if you know Gizzi, you know we're in for an interesting segment. Stay with us.